along with hundreds of individuals who have already joined in support of this campaign as we kick off these initial steps. Today's webinar, as you're learning, is available in English, Arabic, and Spanish, and you can choose the language of your choice using the globe-like icon at the bottom of the screen, and instructions will also be provided as we can in the chat. But if you have any questions or issues with the translation, please indicate in the chat to the hosts, and we will work with you on that. As we consider the settler colonization of Palestine, we consider it also in the context of the historic and ongoing violence of settler colonization across Turtle Island and elsewhere in the world. I'm joining you today from the Mississauga lands on the traditional territory that is covered by the Williams Treaty. We'll put the link into the chat in a moment so you can check the land that you are, Indigenous land that you are on. I'd now like to introduce Jonathan Kuttab, who will be facilitating today's session. Jonathan is known to many of you. He is a co-founder of El Haq. Jonathan is an internal human rights lawyer who practices in the United States, Palestine, and Israel. He is the founding director of Just Peace Advocates and also the executive director of Friends of Sabeel North America. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Karen, and welcome to all of you. I want to first acknowledge the really hard work behind the scenes of so many people to try and get a webinar in 3 different languages with interpretation isn't always an easy thing. First of all, I want to create a little bit of the context in which we are working. As you know, probably people throughout the world know this much more so than in North America, FIFA is a collection of a number of national groups. So there is a Palestinian Football Association, there is an Israeli Football Association, there are regional as well as international groups. Now, FIFA is a very powerful organization, and not always does it reflect the desires of the hundreds of millions of fans and participants who love the game of football throughout the world. In fact, the Palestinian Football Association has had a long history of trying to get Israel to actually live up to the conditions and the regulations of FIFA itself. One of the most basic of them is that they shouldn't infringe on somebody else's territory. They shouldn't allow groups that are in that territory to play in their national football league, or even players without getting permission from that group. Not only that, but they are also required to facilitate the movement of coaches and players back and forth. They are required to allow the building of stadiums and the carrying on of activities, and certainly to refrain from shooting and killing or imprisoning without any cause footballers. In addition to these 2 specific things, there is also the requirement to fight racism. That is sort of a major component of the activity of FIFA worldwide, that they are opposed to racism, that they promote solidarity and brotherhood among nations, and definitely oppose discrimination and racism. On all 3 counts, Israel and the Israeli Football Association has been delinquent, and FIFA has not done enough or has done anything to prevent that. In fact, they have even changed their internal regulations to make it difficult for the Palestinian Football Association to carry out what it needs to do within the structure of FIFA, which is why we, as members of civil society, have to step in. We can't always expect the Palestinian Football Association to do what it needs to be done to bring FIFA to respect its own regulations. This is basically what this webinar is all about, and it's only the first step in a huge campaign that we hope to launch. Of more than 60 organizations and many important individuals have started this kickoff, but we expect many more to join. And we also expect to build on with the work that others, including the BDS Federation, with its campaign, the Red Card campaign, has already done. So we're glad to be part of an international movement to bring about accountability. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our first speaker, who is Rizek Salah. He is the honorary head of the Khader Football Federation. He himself is an ex-prisoner, having spent 21 years in Israeli jails. And I would like to turn over the microphone to him. He will be speaking in Arabic, but you will be able to hear him in English or in Spanish in translation. Please, اللواء رزق صلاح، تفضل.
مساء الخير للجميع. يعني سنتحدث عن جزئية في فلسطين لما يحصل من قبل الاحتلال الإسرائيلي للحركة الرياضية وتحديدا كرة القدم في بلدة اسمها الخضر جنوب بيت لحم ب3 كيلومترات. بتاريخ 10/4/2022 قام جيش الاحتلال باغتيال لاعب من كرة القدم يلعب في نادي الخضر الرياضي لمجرد أنه كان في زيارة لأصدقائه لبيت أصدقائه. البيت هذا المحاذي للشارع 60 الالتفافي الاستيطاني، وقتلوه دون أن يقوم بأي عمل ضد جنود الاحتلال. هذا الشاب الذي يلعب منذ 7 سنوات في نادي الخضر الرياضي فقدناه في لحظة واحدة. اليوم تحديدا ورينا الثرى في بلدة الخضر أيضا. الشبل أو الطفل زيد محمد سعيد غنيم وعمره 14 عام فقط، هذا أيضا يتدرب في أكاديمية نادي الخضر الرياضي. كان في زيارة لبيت جده، خرج من بيت جده لشراء بعض الحاجيات كونه طفل، بعض الشوكولاتات والحلويات من بقالة مجاورة لنقطة للجيش الإسرائيلي والتي تقوم بحماية الشارع الاستيطاني لمستوطنة أفراد المقامة على أرض الخضر، وأشبعوه رصاصا في جسده ورصاصة قاتلة في عنقه. استشهد على الفور وريناه الثرى في بلدة الخضر اليوم. ليس هذا هو العمل الوحيد لسلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي. هناك يعني عدا عمليات القتل تقوم باعتقال لاعبين، وهناك عدد من لاعبي نادي الخضر الرياضي في المعتقل الإسرائيلي أيضا يقومون أحيانا كثيرة وفي معظم المباريات التي تجري على استاد الخضر، وكون استاد الخضر محاذي لشارع استيطاني ودون سبب يذكر، فقط من باب التنكيد على الناس، يقومون بضرب الغاز المسيل للدموع على استاد الخضر أثناء إجراء مباراة الخضر مع أي فريق فلسطيني آخر، ويقوموا بإلقاء الغاز المسيل للدموع على اللاعبين وعلى الجمهور، وهنا يفسدون المباراة وتنتهي المباراة فورا لأنه لا يمكن اللعب في ظل الغاز المسيل للدموع. أيضا هناك من يصيبوه بالرصاص جنود الاحتلال، وأيضا هناك إعاقة الفرق الرياضية وتحديدا فريق الخضر. طبعا هذا ما يجري في الخضر ينسحب على كل قرية وكل مخيم وكل مدينة في فلسطين. يخرج نادي الخضر ليلعب على سبيل المثال مباراة ودية مع إخوته نادي الخليل الرياضي أو نادي رام الله الرياضي، فتجد أن يوقفهم جنود الاحتلال على الحاجز، إما يعيدون باص اللاعبين وإما يعيقونه لعدة ساعات، وبالتالي انتهى ما في مباراة بسبب هذه الإعاقات. هذا ما يقوم به الاحتلال الإسرائيلي تجاه لاعبينا. ما حصل لمحمد غنيم وما حصل اليوم بالأمس تحديدا لأيضا الطفل زيد محمد سعيد غنيم هو عملية قتل جاءت أو كانت نتيجة لقرار سياسي من أعلى المستوى السياسي في إسرائيل، ألا وهو رئيس الحكومة الإسرائيلية نفتالي بنت، حينما قال، وأعتقد أن كل وسائل الإعلام في العالم قد دونت وسجلت هذا التصريح وهذا القرار السياسي من أعلى المستوى، بأن قال من يرفع يده على الجنود الإسرائيليين سيقتل بكل الأسلحة الإسرائيلية. هذا التصريح موثق دوليا لدى وسائل الصحافة والإعلام في كل أنحاء العالم. وحينما نقول تصريحه لمن يرفع يده على جيش الاحتلال، محمد غنيم وزيد غنيم لم يرفعوا يدهم على الاحتلال حتى ينفذ هذا قرار الاغتيال والإعدام الميداني لهذه البراءة للطفولة بهذا الشكل. هو قال إذا رفعت اليد الفلسطينية على الجيش الإسرائيلي سيقتل بكل الأسلحة. هؤلاء الطفلين لم يرفعوا أيديهم على جيش الاحتلال حتى ينفذ بهم هذا القرار. أيضا هم لا يستهدفون الرياضيين فقط، هم يستهدفون أيضا الصحفيين. ولديكم مثال ونموذج قريب جدا، الأخت الصحفية شيرين أبو عاقلة قتلوها غيلة وغدرا حتى يطمسوا الحقيقة ويطمسوا كل ما يحصل في فلسطين. لا يريد في العالم أن يسمع ما يجري في فلسطين من جرائم ومن ظلم يقع على هذا الشعب. لكن لدينا في نادي الخضر الرياضي، وأعتقد جازم أنه ما لدينا في نادي الخضر لدينا في كل نوادي فلسطين، برسالة نوجهها إلى الاتحاد الدولي لكرة القدم الفيفا بألا يتعامل بمكيالين. الحرب الروسية على أوكرانيا لها شهرين، والفرق الروسية أوقفت في كل العالم وقوطعت في كل العالم، لكن نريد أن يحذو الاتحاد الدولي لكرة القدم الفيفا ما حذا وعمل في روسيا أو للفرق الرياضية الروسية أن يعمل أيضا وبعدالة تامة تجاه القضية الفلسطينية. روسيا الحرب فيها منذ شهرين، وفلسطين منذ 74 عام، ونحن نعاني في الحركة الرياضية كما ذكرت لكم سالفا من قتل وتعذيب واعتقال وتهجير للرياضيين الفلسطينيين في الخضر وفي كل فلسطين. نريد من الاتحاد الدولي أن يكون عادلا ومنصفا ويحذو ما حذا في روسيا في أوكرانيا ضد روسيا، أن يعمل أيضا ضد الفريق الإسرائيلي أو الفرق الرياضية الإسرائيلية ومقاطعتها. حينما استشهد محمد غنيم غيلة وغدرا دون أن يرفع يده على الجيش الإسرائيلي، قام نادي الخضر الرياضي بمخاطبة الاتحاد الأرجنتيني لكرة القدم، والذي كان ينوي أن يقوم بإجراء مباراة ودية في 6 حزيران 2022 القادم، بإجراء مباراة ودية مع الاتحاد الرياضي أو الفريق الإسرائيلي لكرة القدم. والحمد لله نشكر الأرجنتين ونشكر الاتحاد الكروي الأرجنتيني بأن أوقف هذه المباراة حينما اطلع وتأكد وثبت له بالدليل بأن محمد غنيم قتل غدرا هذا اللاعب في اتحاد في نادي الخضر الرياضي، ولم يقم بأي عمل مناوئ للاحتلال، مع أنه كل القوانين الدولية تمنح محمد غنيم أن يقاوم من احتل أرضه وبلده. لكن نحن نقول أن محمد غنيم حتى لم يقاوم وقتل دون أن يقاوم وقبل أن يقاوم، ولم يفكر في هذا العمل، وكان مجرد في زيارة لبيت أصدقائه وتم قتله. نحن نطالب أيضا
سيد رزق شكرا
المحكمة أو نطالب الفيفا أيضا بمحاسبة إسرائيل، وليس فقط مقاطعتها، وليس فقط بعدم إجراء المباريات معها. نطالب أيضا بأن تقف إلى جانب الشعب الفلسطيني وأن تدعم هذه لنقل أن تدافع عن هذه المعاناة التي استمرت طويلا منذ 74 عاما. هذه المباراة التي كانت ستقام ربما يكون للإسرائيليين يد في اختيار التاريخ بإجراء المباراة مع الأرجنتين 6-6. هذه تصادف الذكرى 55 للنكسة الفلسطينية، بمعنى احتلال الضفة الغربية وشرق القدس والمسجد الأقصى والمقدسات الإسلامية والمسيحية في القدس وفي بيت لحم، واحتلال قطاع غزة واحتلال الجولان السوري المحتل. هذا لم
شكرا.
يكن التاريخ، أعتقد أنه قد
شكرا
تم اختياره صدفة.
سيد رزق.
لذلك الاحتلال الإسرائيلي يريد أن يمنع ليس فقط على الفلسطيني أن يمارس كرة القدم، هو يريد أن يمنع عليه كل أساليب أو كل ما هو يؤدي إلى الحياة. بمعنى
شكرا.
ليس
شكرا سيد رزق.
لا يعتقد
سيد
الاحتلال
رزق،
الإسرائيلي. تفضل.
انتهت الوقت وراح يكون في فرصة مع الأسئلة فيما بعد.
إن شاء الله.
معلش
شكرا.
اسمح لي.
شكرا
Thank you
لكم.
very much, Rizek, for a very powerful description of what is happening on a day-to-day to one group, one club, the Khader Club, which also happened to other clubs. We will go back to Mr. Rizek later with the questions and answers, but we want to hear now from attorney Gonzalo Boye, who is in Spain and who was representing and assisting the Palestinian Football Association in its attempt to get some kind of justice within the structures of FIFA in the past. Mr. Gonzalo, please, the microphone is yours.
Thanks, Jonathan. I will speak slowly, both to help the interpreters and to allow FIFA to understand fully what I will say.
Thank you.
During the period that I oversaw the legal department of the Palestine Football Association, our main objective was to try to get FIFA to force the Israeli Football Association to respect FIFA's own rules. These were intense years in which we were subject to all kinds of pressures and action that have very little to do with what should be the ethics of any sport association. A specific committee was created in FIFA for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, chaired by the South African Tokyo Segwale. And all the work carried out there served to produce a series of documents that proved that our legal positions were solid and could not be contradicted. Once again, as it always happened with the Palestinian case, reason and the law were on our side. The powerful people were not. Susan Shalabi, Jibril Rajoub, and the whole PFA were fully committed to this task, and we have devoted years of work in order to reconduct not only the attitude of the Israeli Football Association, but also and especially FIFA's own behavior. FIFA even created a human rights department, a department that has never properly acted in defense of human rights, nor has worked to prevent human rights violations related to football and its related activities. After a while, 5 years of hard work, however, we realized that in reality, it was not only that the Israeli Football Association did not intend to comply with FIFA statute, but that FIFA itself was not interested in making them respect those statutes. So at the end of the day, it was not only the Israeli Football Association, but also FIFA's own fault. While Mr. Infantino was telling us one thing in private, he was saying and doing another in public. And worse still, he was generating support to discourage all of those within FIFA who understood our claim and assumed that it was based exclusively on FIFA's own rules. And this is important. We have always based all our claims in FIFA's own rules. Surely, one day we will know what type of pressure they put on Mr. Infantino himself, or why he has never wanted FIFA to honor its own status and act within the framework of respect of human rights and international law. But not all the blame should go to Mr. Infantino and FIFA, also to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, as it was also in their hands to reconduct the situation, but they prefer to look in another direction. Federated sport activities inside Israel's settlements in occupied Palestinian territory are undoubtedly war crimes. And after years of struggle, we have seen how FIFA has been complicit in and cover up these sort of crimes. But not only FIFA, also the companies that sponsor the football activities of those clubs installed in the Palestinian occupied territories are liable for this sort of crimes. And I'm pointing out to the companies because football, that sort of football without money will never take place. Sport should be an instrument of union between people. Football, for various reasons, should be more so, but they will never achieve this if their own leaders do not respect that which is basic to peaceful coexistence. We, the jurists, call rules of coexistence, among which those relating to human rights and international law are basic. In the field of sport, it can be called fair play. Therefore, I concluded by asking, how does FIFA expect future generation of footballers to respect fair play if itself that does not respect it? And this is the real problem. FIFA does not respect its own rules. FIFA does not respect human rights. FIFA does not respect international humanitarian law and international law. So at the end, how can we expect Israeli Football Association to respect it when FIFA governing body is not doing that? The fault isn't the Israeli side, but the fault and the major part of the fault is on the FIFA, who has all the means and the tools to prohibit the activities of federated football in the occupied territories. And I think that the rest of the talk, we can leave it for the question and answer, because Jonathan, I really would like to stick to the 10 minutes that you have said at the beginning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gonzalo, and thank you for sticking to the time. But you have pointed out something very important, which is that often the organization itself, FIFA, does not follow its own rules, is subject to pressures from those who are powerful. Well, what happens when an organization doesn't follow its rules? When a government doesn't follow its own rules? Well, that's when ordinary people like us in civil society have to move in and pressure them to do so. This is where our next speaker comes in. Many of you know Roger Waters as an entertainer, as a rock star, as a wonderful person who makes people happy with his music. But what some of you also know is that he is an activist. He is a person with a conscience. He's a person who puts his star status at the service of causes of justice and causes of freedom that he believes in. But very few people of you know that he is also a supporter of the Palestinian people and a supporter particularly of the need to make FIFA accountable. So I turn the microphone over to you, Roger. Take it away.
Well, thank you very much. Anybody who doesn't know that I'm a supporter of freedom for the Palestinian people has been wandering around with their eyes shut and covering their ears with muffs for the last 15 years or so, because I've tried to make as much noise as I possibly can in those areas. I listened with great interest to all the speakers so far that I have listened to, particularly the last speaker. I'm so bad with names. Forgive me if I don't call you by your names. The law. We cannot rely on the law. If we could rely on the law, we would not be having this conversation now. It is quite clear this year on the 74th anniversary of the Nakba that if international law had teeth, if the ICC could perform the duty for which it was set up, which it can't because some of the most powerful countries in the world do not subscribe to the Treaty of Rome or any of the other accoutrements of what we might think was international law, we would not be sitting in this webinar having this conversation. The criminality of the Zionist project in Palestine is so open and clear and demonstrable and arguable against in any court of law anywhere in the world except possibly Israel, that we throw our hands up in exasperation and frustration and say, but, obviously it's completely illegal and it's an open and shut case. We know that. This is why this talk with FIFA and with everybody all over the world who cares about the beautiful game, football, is so important, because it will engage people power, ordinary people like me. I mean, for my sins, I'm an Arsenal supporter. I have been all my life. It's a hard life for us Arsenal supporters, but nevertheless, we are passionate, as are the supporters of all the football clubs all over the world, whether there's village teams or small clubs in small towns in South America or wherever. We care passionately about this game. And I have seen the people power at football clubs demonstrated. 5 or 6 years ago, I did a gig somewhere in Palm Springs, I think it was, and I got into a conversation with the supporters of Celtic Football Club in Glasgow, in Scotland, because UEFA, the European version of FIFA, fined them because somebody held up a Palestinian flag when there was a visiting Israeli team in a European competition, I believe it. They fined them. What did the supporters of Celtic do? The next time it happened, everybody in the stadium was holding up a Palestinian flag and saying, F you. We don't care what you think. We, like Roger Waters and Jonathan Kuttab, we believe in human rights. That is our platform. Paris, 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If we can stand on that platform, none of these questions ever arise. So that's the people. But the other thing is player power, right? So, and I've seen it beginning to rise in the last few years. Chowdhury at Leicester City. I'm only talking about the English league now because I don't know about other football leagues. We have a player at Arsenal, Mohamed El Neni, who has been supporting this cause as loud as he can, because obviously if he raises his voice, he gets his knuckles rapped by the club and told to shut up. El Neni, you be quiet. That is not the West's view of this. You have to be, and El Neni has said, no, I'm not going to be quiet. Mo Salah is playing this afternoon in the Champions League final in Paris. Mo has also made some grumbling noises. I want Mo Salah to stand on the top of Mount Everest and go, no, this is wrong. This is completely wrong. What all these people on these webinars said about the law is absolutely correct. And we have to tell FIFA, just tell them, no, we will not play in these competitions. Now, it was mainly the men in the street back in the 90s who persuaded the South African regime that apartheid was wrong. Well, it was wrong. It was wrong then, and it's wrong in Israel now. But the South Africans, the ruling class in South Africa, only really turned around and woke up and started to think, oh my God, maybe we have to change something. Excuse my South African accent, but I have to use it sometimes. When they realized they're not going to play cricket or rugby with us. Trust me, that is exactly the reaction that we will get from the Israeli population if we can implement all the things that my colleagues, fellow activists, politicians, friends, football club directors that I'm hearing on this webinar. We need to get the Israeli people to wake up to the fact that, notwithstanding all the Hasbara and the propaganda that they've lived under since they were tiny babies until now, that the world will not accept it any longer. Apartheid is wrong, and we will not play football with you. And that is an end of it. And that's sort of all I have to say, except to thank you so much for having me on and giving me this platform to say a few words.
Thank you, Roger. I think you have put your finger right on it. I did not imply that people did not know that you're supporting the Palestinians. What I did want to emphasize is that you have been at the forefront of those who have pointed out to this type of campaign, specifically to FIFA, that we should target FIFA and that we should get football clubs behind it and players behind it and use people power where the regular legal channels have failed, and where one interesting thing that I should mention, and all of you I'm sure are aware of this, and it goes beyond just the issue of a double standard. For many years, players were told politics and sport don't mix. The beautiful game is the beautiful game. You should not get it mixed up with politics. All of a sudden now, 2 months ago, people realized that yes, they do mix. All of a sudden, people are carrying Ukrainian flags everywhere, and people are protesting Russia's actions, and people are actually prohibiting Russian teams from playing with them. There is an organized, powerful boycott of all Russian teams and players. Now, I'm saying politics and sports mix specifically on the issue of apartheid, discrimination, and racism. The beautiful game is the game of bringing people together and prohibiting racism and discrimination. Thank you very much, Roger. And now I think we will listen or we will give an opportunity for people who have specific questions to ask of Roger, of myself, of Rizek Salah, or of attorney Gonzalo Boye, because it is important for us to have our facts right and our facts straight, and to go through the proper channels. And when they fail, which they have failed, then we should go to the street and go into the playgrounds and bring people power to bear. Now, if you have any question, you can go into the chat box. I will remind you that we can deal with questions and responses in any of the 3 languages, English, Arabic, or Spanish. So we will now turn into questions and answers if there are any.
Hi, Jonathan. So we've got a few questions and comments coming in. I just remind people that they should use the question option to provide those, not into the chat. So if you've got questions and still haven't asked them to, please put them into the chat. First, though, I do want to highlight, and those of you that are following the chat will have noticed message coming from our friends in Uruguay around their particular campaign. It's called Uruguay Noveas. I hope I did that okay in Spanish. It's similar to the one in Argentina, I guess a friendly match between its national team and Israel, which they'd managed to cancel. And for that campaign, they received a letter from Khader Football Team. The main social organizations and movements in Uruguay have supported this demand. The letter to the AUF will be delivered next week, and until then it won't be published. I think it's okay that we include that in here, but there is certainly information and support coming from around the world for this campaign. So would there be, and I'm being told from that it is actually not a friendly match, but an actual invitation to the national team to make final preparations for the World Cup in Israel. So I'm wondering if the panelists, any comments to make in that regard before I go to some of the questions.
Roger?
I'm sorry, I confess that I didn't really hear the whole of that question. It's about people training in Israel, is it? For the World Cup. I heard the very end of it. My advice to anybody in any international team or any team at all about training for a competition in Israel is don't go read the manifesto of the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement and broadly follow its principles. Until the refugees are allowed the right of return, and until people in Palestine are get to self-determination and to live under democratic rules, if you like. No, they must be boycotted. Nobody should go to Israel to train for any football match ever until the Football Association in Israel has been removed from FISA's lists, until they subscribe to international law and disavow and distance themselves from the apartheid system of occupation that they have been using for the last 74 years. So the answer is no, you can't go and train there. Please don't.
And I think also, thanks so much, Roger. I think also the question is a letter from Palestine, from the Khader team, and that we'll work to facilitate that, and that is being raised, that in the case of Iroquois, it is not a friendly match, but the actual invitation, I'm having trouble with the chat here, invitation to the national team to make the final preparations for the World Cup in Israel. So we will we'll do that. And I see Gonzalo's hands up, so we'll go to him. And then after that, I will get to some of the other questions.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make clear something. For 5 years, we have gone through the path of the law, and we have exhausted all that way. And we have demonstrated that we are right. And they didn't want to recognize that, and they didn't want to attend that. So in my opinion, now is the time for a different sort of action. And when I was a rugby player at the university, we saw the boycott of the Rugby Union of South Africa, and we saw how effective it was. And at the end, South Africa was playing only with Argentina, but not with a normal Argentina, but with the Argentinian of the dictatorship. And that was their level, and that really works. But as a lawyer, my duty was first to go through the legal means. We have exhausted. That's finished. Now is the time for action, and this is a time that the civil society has to overtake the what we have done and use it. We are right. The law is on our side. The reason is our side, and the ethic is on our side. So all what we can do is really to act as proper activists, and the civil society has to.
Great, and actually leading right into that is one of the questions around what do we need to do first? What should people in this campaign look at as a first target? For example, should we try to approach official football federation in each country to try to get them to sign on and endorse the FIFA appeal? And so what are some of your thoughts in that regard? Fans
need to take Palestinian flags to their local football match, not on any special occasion, just as exactly like somebody brought up the Ukraine thing, and what an opportunity that has been for this conversation to burst out, because it's suddenly the hypocrisy is so blatant and appalling that what we care about Ukrainians, but we don't care about Palestinians. How is that possible? It's a bit like I was reminded as well, Karen, about Rodney Bennett, who was an American football player for the Seattle Seahawks, who was offered a few shekels to go to Israel to help sport wash Israel. And he looked into the whole thing and he said no, and it became a story. And in his saying, no, I am not going to go on that trip, he quoted John Carlos, who was the Olympic athlete who stood up in Mexico City in 1968 with his black glove on, with the Black Power salute. And what Carlos said later was, he said, in matters of human rights and human justice, he said, you are either in or you're out. I'm in. And Rodney Bennett said, I'm in too. Well, I'm in, and so are all of you. We're in. We want the whole world football watchers to be in. This is not complicated. They are always trying to convince us that there is something complex about Israel and Palestine. There is not. There aren't. There are the oppressors and the oppressed. And John Carlos stood with the oppressed, and so did Rodney Bennett, and so do all of us, and so must all of them. I was really interested to hear about the Rugby Football Union. And, you know, I remember, I'm old enough to remember what happened there. They were flabbergasted. They were absolutely amazed. They could not believe that we wouldn't play rugby with them. No, we won't, because you're unacceptable. And in the matter of human rights and universal justice, you're either in or you're out. We're in, you're out. And they changed. To what extent, I don't know, but they did. So
thank you. It's also important to keep it hopeful.
Yeah.
To keep it positive.
Yeah.
We are hoping for change. We are hoping for equality. We are hoping for an end to racism, an end to occupation, an end to oppression. Many times people say we are powerless. What can we do? We can do nothing. They have the guns, they have the tanks, they have the power, they have a 1%, the powerful, always standing with them. And we say, no, we have right on our side, people on our side, and we do care for everyone.
Absolutely.
When we speak about equality, we're not speaking about hatred for anyone. We're speaking about equality for everybody. Then I think I saw a question, another question, Karen.
Yeah, I've got, there's several in the chat and I'm getting some offline. So let me just work with what we have. There's several related to South Africa and maybe lessons learned and an approach, as well as the United Nations General Assembly. So during apartheid rule in South Africa, the United Nations General Assembly had issued a resolution for the creation of an apartheid committee, in addition to resolutions for BDS, or boycott, divestment, and sanctions against apartheid South Africa regime. So now, since the apartheid reports have been issued from Amnesty and the other groups, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, and others, regarding Palestine, I guess the question is specifically to Gonzalo, but it could be to others. Could you tell us what possible steps we might take at the United Nations General Assembly to revive a new apartheid committee for Palestine and issue a BDS resolution against Israel, in addition to, of course, the work that we're doing in regard to FIFA on this as well?
Well, I think that's more a political action than a legal one, and that in order to achieve such political actions, maybe you need a lot of support. Roger was saying something important: take the flags to the stadium. Well, as long as you take a lot of flags to the stadium, 30, 40, 50, 70, 90,000 flags, as you can take in a stadium like in Madrid or Barcelona or many other places, that will have a tremendous repercussion, because all those matches are televised. I mean, can you imagine if in the finals tonight, they will take, everybody who goes to the stadium take a Palestinian flag. Tomorrow, the problem will be not the result of the match, it will be the problem of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And that's the reason, that's what will give power in order to force a resolution of the United Nations. But we know the United Nations is what it is.
You know, sorry, I just want to say something. After COVID, the first football matches that started again, I watched a Premier League match, and all the players took a knee, and every single one of them had Black Lives Matter written across the back of their shirt. I was proud to be English for the first time, you know, in about 30 years. To see that on an English football pitch really moved my inner Englishman. So it's hugely, of course, it's been slightly watered down now. It's now football against racism, but they continuing with it. It's every single match they take a knee. And it's hugely important, because either you are against racism or you're not. All those players taking a knee, and the officials and the Football Association in England are all saying, we are against. Well, if you are, why are you playing soccer with Israel? It's the most racist possible situation that you could possibly imagine anywhere. Why don't you act upon the fact that you want to stamp out racism? It's really important. What happens in the clubs is so important. Sorry, it was banging on.
This is great. Thank you so much, Roger. Jonathan, did you want to get in on that question, or should I ask?
Yeah. No, ask another question, because I thought I saw a question about what do we need to do for the upcoming Mondial, for the upcoming World Cup in Qatar.
Well, let's go to that question next. I am trying to pick and choose because there's lots coming in. So let's go to that question next.
And I'd like to ask Rizek also to really give us a few of his thoughts of what happens in the upcoming World Cup and what does he expect players, groups, and countries to do in the upcoming club. Sayyid Rizek.
أنا أتوقع من العالم وقبل حتى أن يجري أو تجري مباريات كأس العالم في شهر نوفمبر القادم في قطر، أنا أعتقد أنه يجب أن تجمع كل نوادي العالم على إدانة الممارسات الإسرائيلية تجاه الحركة الرياضية في فلسطين، سيما وهم يعرفون تماما أن النظام في إسرائيل هو نظام أبارتهايد بامتياز. وعلى فكرة نظام الفصل العنصري في إسرائيل تجاوز ما كان عليه في جنوب أفريقيا. اللهم أعتقد أن الإسرائيليين على درجة من الذكاء أنهم لم يضعوا فقط لافتات على المطاعم الإسرائيلية ويكتبوا عليها ممنوع دخول الفلسطينيين والكلاب إلى المطاعم الإسرائيلية. هذا يحصل لكن دون أن يضعوا اللافتات. إسرائيل تتحدث بكلام معسول عن الديمقراطية وعن حقوق الإنسان وعن امتثالها للقانون الدولي، لكنها في حقيقة الأمر بعيدة كل البعد عن هذا الأمر. تطرقتم إلى الحديث عن الأمم المتحدة وعن إصدار قرار في الأمم المتحدة في هذا الشأن. أعتقد أن هناك قرارات أممية سابقة اتخذت ضد العنصرية الإسرائيلية وضد الظلم الإسرائيلي منذ عشرات السنوات في الأمم المتحدة ولم تطبق. ليش؟ لأن إسرائيل تعتبر نفسها فوق القانون الدولي، وبالتالي هي محمية للأسف بنظام دولي ظالم ممثل بحكومة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، فهي تمارس كل الأعمال الشيطنة تجاه الشعب الفلسطيني ولا سيما الحركة الرياضية، ومعتبرة نفسها محمية بهذا النظام العالمي الظالم. أعتقد أيضا أن الفيفا تسير على نهج إسرائيل في قضية المعاملة في الرياضة مع الرياضة الفلسطينية. كان مفترض من الفيفا أن يحترم نظمه وقوانينه ومعاييره وأن يطبقها بعدالة على كل الأنظمة أو على كل الكادر الرياضي في جميع أنحاء العالم. هلا ما أطالبه أنا من المجتمع الدولي وتحديدا من الحركة الرياضية في العالم قبل كأس العالم أن يقفوا وقفة رجل واحد لمناصرة الشعب الفلسطيني، وأن يضع كل نادي رياضي في العالم نفسه مكان الفلسطينيين ويتخيل ما يعانيه الفلسطينيين جراء الاحتلال في الحركة الرياضية. هو كونه في أوروبا، في إسبانيا، في إيطاليا، في بريطانيا، له مطلق الحرية في ممارسة الحركة الرياضية فيصل بسرعة إلى كأس العالم، لكن الفلسطيني منذ هذه اللحظة ولألف عام قادمة ربما لم يستطع أن يصل كأس العالم لأنه محروم كثيرا جدا بسبب العقوبات الإسرائيلية التي تمارس عليه في فلسطين. وبالتالي نطالب أيضا بتعاطف بإنصاف مثل ما تم تعاطف دولي، ونحن ندعم هذا التعاطف مع القضية الأوكرانية والتي لها منذ شهرين أن يكون هناك تعاطف ليس متساويا بل مضاعفا لفلسطين، لأن الحديث عن أوكرانيا يدور منذ شهرين، لكن الحديث عن الظلم على الفلسطيني من قبل إسرائيل الحديث يدور عن 74 عام. شكرا لكم.
If I may also chime in on this, I would like to mention to everybody who is listening today that this is just the beginning of a campaign, which we hope to increase continuously, and hopefully the events of the World Cup will be an important venue in which to bring it to a crescendo. We need more organizations to join. We need specific actions in each country. We need particular clubs to also take up the issue. Many times people say we can do nothing. No, we can do something. Even if it's just raising the Palestinian flag all the time, we can make sure that we are on the side of justice, on the side of equality. Many people say, why are you just speaking on Israel? We are not. We stand for equality. We stand against racism and discrimination, no matter where it is, no matter who is guilty or who is the victim. This is not a partisan issue, it's a moral issue.
Can I just say one thing as well? Somebody was saying that we should at least have some optimism in our movement, and I was nodding. Yes, absolutely we should. 10 years ago, 2012, November the 29th, I spoke to the Human Rights Committee of the United Nations in New York City. Now, and I made a speech and it was all very nice and blah, blah, blah. But had I mentioned the word apartheid in 2012 alongside the word Israel, I would have disappeared under a pile of shoes and paper cups. It would have been completely not allowed. You couldn't. Now, in 2022, you cannot have a conversation about Israel without using the word apartheid. It is absolutely accepted. So that's one thing. Things have changed, and they've changed radically, and they changed very quickly. And the other thing is, I must put out a word for the peace movement within the Jewish community in Canada and in the United States. These are the two sort of countries where I know it better. It has changed exponentially. The uprising of people, Jewish people of good faith, who are with us, who are with you, who are with the idea that justice should be universal and human rights have to be universal. It's changed exponentially as well, and in the young people in the universities. So we are winning this fight. We are winning the fight against the ministry of whatever it is in Tel Aviv that creates all the Hasbara that we fight against. So we should feel good about that moving into 2022 and the World Cup. That's it.
Karen, next question.
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions related to racism. I think we've touched on that, but racism within the Israeli Football League. And I mean, I'm also thinking, Gonzalo, in terms of some of the legal work and the work that was done so painstakingly through the decade or so related to racism and you know, other things related to settlement, but also just generally racism. So that would be sort of the one theme of a question. Another one that maybe I could put in is, are there, you know, a couple, maybe 3, 4 more football superstars that we could be reaching out to? They've made a couple of names. I'm not a football a person enough to maybe know who they would be or who to suggest, but like sort of, so are there things like that we can do? So those are two kind of different questions, but just to group those together, because I know we're, you know, closing in on time.
Somebody, I saw a news item on the internet this morning. Somebody, a league, the Italian league, I think, has just been won by a club, and the captain of that club was carrying a Palestinian flag in his hand when he went to take the cup at the beginning. So it is happening, you know. Riyad Mahrez, a great right winger for Manchester City, has been very outspoken about these matters. They're there and they're beginning to get the feeling that they can stand up and be counted. And there will be more and more of them. And there are many as well. There are many politically motivated young people in football in England. Marcus Rashford, he plays for Manchester United. He's a very well-known international player, but he does a lot of work with disadvantaged people, homeless people, but also with children's charities and things in Manchester, his hometown. So that there are people, and there are a lot of them, I'm sure, you know, who understand what it is that we're talking about and how important the rights of ordinary people all over the world are, the dispossessed, the poor, the cold, the hungry, the war-shattered, the refugees, the Palestinians, the Syrians, the list is endless, but it's a list that we acknowledge. And Marcus Rashford does, and so do hundreds, I'm sure. We just need them to go, yeah, I'm in. We need more Rodney Bennett's and John Carlos's in this world. And they are there, and we will find them, and they will join us. I know it. I know it.
Well, I'm pretty sure that when 11 at one time decide not to play football with Israel or in football related with Israel, FIFA will take proper action. But there was an unanswered question about the World Cup in Qatar.
Yeah.
I mean, my answer is we should not go. That country violated human rights in order to build the stadiums. And that country was helping FIFA in order to prevent Palestine Football Association to succeed in our proposals for the clubs in the settlement. So if we are against violations of human rights, we should defend the human rights both in Palestine, but also in Qatar.
Here, here.
And for me, my answer is very clear. Don't go there.
Karen, any more questions?
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Too many multitasks. There are a couple of other questions. There's one that actually just got put into the chat around, can we address the continuation of the Palestine Cup with FIFA directly? Maybe that's a lower target than sort of the suspension that we've been talking about. Any comments on that?
FIFA will follow. FIFA is not going to lead you anywhere. FIFA is one of these 1% powerful organizations that is entirely controlled by the ruling class, whatever you want to call it. They are not going to lead you anywhere. Once you've got them by the nose and you're dragging them forward and it hurts, they'll go wherever you lead. But the people have to lead them. They are not going to do anything ever. They're corrupt. It's a completely corrupt organization. Everybody has known it for umpteen years. We know that. Ignore them. We need to take this into our own hands.
Going backwards to the boycott of rugby in South Africa, and what just Roger has said is very important. I mean, FIFA is a business and a corrupt business institution. At that time, the success of the rugby boycott to South Africa was based in rugby was not a professional game. It was a game that we used to play in our free time. And we were much more interested in fair play rather than in business. And we decided not to play against South African teams. And that was a success. And we didn't have fear not to play. And I think we have to create a bit more awareness in the footballers. A, that they should not fear. B, that they will be well defended by the people if they decide to move forward in a position against the Israeli football. And C, that there is no rule that they can use against them for doing exactly what they want to tell, they want to say in public. I mean, at the end of the day, it's free speech. If they want to speak freely, they have the right to speak freely, and they should know that that's free speech is one of their fundamental rights.
Yeah.
Well,
if only.
Go ahead, Roger.
No, I'm sorry, but when somebody talks about free speech, and I love that you're talking about speech, obviously it's very, very close to my heart and to all of our hearts, but I can't let the opportunity to go to say, Priti Patel, free Julian Assange. Free speech is one of the most important cornerstones of the possibility for this planet to survive. What are you doing? Why do you have to even think for 5 minutes? obviously it was a complete travesty, all the trials and the blah, blah, and the extradition proceeding. It's nonsense. Just let the man go home to his wife and children and resume his work as the most important publisher in the 21st century. Sorry, that's all. I can't let that go by without saying it.
Okay, Roger, I think we're getting close to the end unless there are additional questions in the chat box. I would like to give a couple of minutes to each of our panelists to give a final word because I know it's Saturday and people want to go out. Shall I start with Rizek? If you have a final 2 minutes, please keep it short. Your message has been very strong. Repeat it, please. Give us your final 2 minutes. Rizek?
يعني ما نريده بشكل أكبر في كأس العالم القادم في نوفمبر القادم في دولة قطر الشقيقة أن يكون هناك تضامن أكبر مع الحركة الرياضية الفلسطينية عالميا، مع الشعب الفلسطيني المعذب والمهجر والمقتول والمصاب والمعتقل والمهدم بيوته والمجرف مزروعاته وبساتينه، أن يكون هناك تضامنا أكبر في هذا الحدث العالمي المهم. نريد أن نشاهد أعلاما فلسطينية بشكل أكبر وبشكل مكثف في استادات قطر الرياضي أثناء إجراء هذا كأس العالم. شاهدنا نحن اللاعب رياض محرز الذي يلعب في مانشستر سيتي يرفع العلم الفلسطيني مرتين في عام 2021 وفي هذا العام 2022، وأيضا اللاعب بول بوجبا كان أيضا يرفع العلم الفلسطيني حينما ينزل إلى الملعب. وهناك أيضا جماهير سلتك حينما الإيرلندية حينما كانت تزين الاستاد الخاص بها بأعلام فلسطين. فنحن نعرف تماما لماذا كانوا يقومون بهذه الأعمال، لأنهم كانوا يعرفون أن هذا النظام كانوا يقومون بها نكاية بما يقوم به نظام الفصل العنصري القائم في دولة الكيان الإسرائيلي. ولذلك نطالب أيضا الفيفا أن تقف مرة أخرى وللمرة الألف أن تقف عند مسؤولياتها وأن تكون مع قوة الحق والذي يمثلها الفلسطينيين، ولا تقف إلى جانب حق القوة والباطل الممثل في إسرائيل. وشكرا.
Thank you, Rizek. 2 minutes, Mr. Gonzalo Boye.
Okay, very quickly, just to say that I think, as I was saying before, it's time to create awareness and create it among the footballers and the followers of the teams. No matter how big a team is, if you're talking about Santiago Wanderers from Chile or you're talking from Barcelona Football Club, you have to create awareness in all those clubs and start this from bottom to the high, from the civil society into the football clubs. And as Roger said, FIFA will follow. No matter when, they will follow. And if they don't follow, we don't need FIFA. That's the real situation.
Thank you. Roger, final word.
Well, I'm just going to put my flag on. And I will always be wearing my flag wherever I go and whatever I do. And the one football club where I know I will always be welcome, it's funny you should mention that, is in Santiago in Chile, the Palestinian Football Club, which is a very ancient and powerful and wonderful club. So I send my love to all my Chilean friends, and well done in the presidential election, by the way. And that's all I have to say, except that it was a great honor to be on this webinar with all of you wonderful people. So I'm very proud to have been able to take part in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, final word about logistics, where people can get a recording in the different languages.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, so the recording, it has been on Facebook and the link has been put in. So go to Just Peace Advocates or to Friends of Sabeel North America's Facebook pages and share. That will be the English version, but the Arabic, Spanish, and English will be put up onto the YouTube channels for Just Peace Advocates and I think for Friends of Sabeel North America. And we'll be providing that link to those who registered. There were about 350 people who are registered for today's event. So we will be sharing it with anybody who registered, whether they made it online or not with us. And it'll be available through social media and other places. And we'll be providing key links. The main thing right now is just simply if people can sign on to the individual statement, or if you're part of organizations, especially sports teams and leagues, or can get to other athletes or other folks to sign on to the campaign. This is the early days. So if you can do that, there will be many more actions. And I think some of those ideas have come out here that I think we will be looking to follow up on. So I think that's it for logistics, other than just to say thank you, as I know you will, Jonathan, as well, to our translators and everybody in the back room and to all of our participants and panelists.
Yes, thank you. Definitely thanks to all of those behind the scenes who have made this webinar possible. Thanks to all the panelists, and thanks to all the people who have been working in this field, the BDS community, the campaigns that have been taking place, the individuals who have worked behind the scenes, the unknown soldiers. And just a reminder to all of you, this is just the first step. We are launching a campaign. We want more organizations to join. We want more individuals to join, and we want more actions and activities. And I think this can be one of the most effective tools that we have in our arsenal now to work non-violently for a just, peaceful solution of equality and justice, and against discrimination, racism, and apartheid. There is no room for apartheid in the beautiful sport of soccer. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Well said.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.